The massive space station called Kepler stretched out like a metal city among the stars. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its ports every day, bringing traders, diplomats, and travelers from across the galaxy. The corridors buzzed, with strange languages and the sounds of alien machinery. But humans were still newcomers here, barely accepted by the older civilizations. In a tiny room deep in the station's lower levels, 16-year-old Jimin Park sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully taking apart a broken power unit. Wires and metal pieces were scattered around her like puzzle pieces. Her small living space looked like a junkyard, every surface covered with old machines, half-built gadgets, and tools she had collected from the station's garbage areas. Jimin lived here with her uncle Taiho, who worked in the station's waste management system. Her parents had died 2 years ago when their mining ship exploded in deep space, leaving her alone except for her father's brother. While most humans on the station tried to stay quiet and follow all the rules to prove they belonged, Jimin could never stop herself from building and fixing things. "Why can't you just leave those old machines alone?" Uncle Taiho often asked her. But Jimin's hands always itched to understand how things worked, to make them better somehow. That morning she had been working on a small energy cell that she found in the recycling center. The aliens threw away so many useful parts, and Jimin could see ways to make them work better. She had rewired the cell to store more power and connected it to a simple converter she built from spare parts. When she activated her creation, everything seemed fine at first. The little device hummed quietly and showed good energy readings on her homemade scanner. But then something went wrong. The power cell began to glow brighter and brighter, making a high-pitched whining sound. Jimin tried to shut it down, but her hands were shaking. Suddenly, the device exploded in a shower of sparks. The lights in her room went out immediately. Then the corridor outside went dark. Within minutes, she could hear alarms blaring throughout the entire section of the station. Uncle Taiho burst through her door, his face pale with fear. "Jimin, what did you do?" Before she could answer, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. The door slid open with a hiss, and 3 tall figures in dark uniforms entered. They were Vrex, insect-like aliens with multiple arms and compound eyes, that served as the station's security force. Their leader, Captain Zix, looked at the mess of burned electronics and shook his head. "The human girl caused a power surge that knocked out 3 sectors," he said in his clicking voice. "The Galactic Council wants to see her immediately." They escorted Jimin through the station's upper levels, past shops and restaurants she had never seen before. Other beings stopped to stare at the small human girl being led away by security. Some looked curious, others seemed angry, and a few appeared frightened. The council chamber was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Representatives from the major alien species sat in a circle around the center, where Jimin stood feeling very small and scared. The Harmony beings looked like living crystals that spoke through flashing lights. The Depth Collective lived in tanks of water and communicated through color changes in their skin. The Valdari were made of silicon and metal, more like sophisticated robots than living creatures. All of them looked down at Jimin with disapproval. "This human child has shown the dangerous nature of her species," announced the lead Valdari in a voice like grinding rocks. "They act on emotion rather than logic. They experiment without proper planning. They are too unpredictable to live safely among civilized beings." Uncle Taiho stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Please, honored council members, she's just a child. She meant no harm. I'll pay for all the damages. I'll make sure she never experiments again." But the council had already made their decision. "The human will be exiled to Omega-7, the Valdari continued. "This station has been abandoned for decades due to dangerous conditions. If she survives, perhaps she will learn the value of caution." Jimin felt her heart stop. Omega-7 was famous throughout the galaxy as a place where research teams had tried to work but always fled in fear. No one had lived there for 30 years. 2 hours later, Jimin sat in a small shuttle with just enough supplies for a few months. Uncle Taiho had hugged her goodbye with tears in his eyes, unable to speak. As the shuttle carried her away from Kepler Station, Jimin clutched the one thing she had been allowed to take, her father's old toolkit. She remembered his words from long ago. Humans fix things differently than others, Jimin. We don't just repair them. We make them better. Looking out at the dark shape of Omega-7 growing larger ahead of her, Jimin wondered if her father's tools would be enough to help her survive in the place the galaxy considered a tomb. When Jimin's shuttle reached Omega-7, she saw why every alien species had run away from this place. The research station looked like a twisted nightmare floating in space. Parts of it seemed to bend in impossible directions, and some sections appeared to be moving even though they should have been solid metal. Her shuttle docked with a loud crash that echoed through empty corridors. The moment Jimin stepped inside, she felt something was very wrong. The floor beneath her feet seemed normal, but then suddenly she was falling sideways into what had been a wall. Gravity here didn't follow any rules she knew. The station was huge, with endless hallways leading to laboratories that different alien species had built over the years. Each room told a sad story of brilliant scientists who had tried to work here but failed. In one lab, she found Valdari equipment, normally perfect and precise, now twisted into strange metal sculptures. The machines looked like they had been folded like paper. Another room held the remains of Harmony computers. These crystal devices should have glowed with steady light, but instead they flickered wildly, showing corrupted data that made no sense. Even the Depths Collective had tried to work here, leaving behind their special water chambers now empty and cracked. Jimin found personal logs scattered throughout the station, recorded by researchers from many different worlds. She played them on an old viewer she managed to fix. Every log said the same thing. The gravity here was completely crazy. It changed without warning and followed no scientific rules. Scientists had tried for years to understand it, but the strange forces had driven them all away. Day 47, one Valdari scientist had recorded. The anomalies grow stronger. My instruments cannot detect any pattern. Logic suggests we should leave immediately. The gravitational fields are impossible, a Harmony researcher had noted. They respond to our presence in ways that make no sense. We fear for our sanity. But as weeks passed, Jimin began to notice something the alien scientist had missed. She spent her days walking through the station, feeling how gravity shifted around her. At first it seemed completely random, just like the log said. But slowly, she started to hear something like a rhythm in the chaos. The gravity changes weren't just random, they seemed to respond to her. When she moved quickly, the gravitational field would shift to match her speed. When she was scared or worried, the forces became more violent. When she felt calm, they seemed to settle down. One day, while humming an old song her mother used to sing, Jimin noticed that the gravity around her became smoother, more gentle. It was as if the strange forces were listening to her music and trying to match it. This gave her an idea that would have seemed crazy to any alien scientist. Instead of fighting against the gravitational anomalies, maybe she could work with them. Maybe they weren't problems to be solved, but partners to be understood. Jimin set up a workshop in one of the smaller labs and began building something she called her toy. She had no real plan, just an idea that felt right in her heart. She gathered broken pieces from all the abandoned alien technology, Valdari precision tools, Harmony light crystals, and Depths collective neural interfaces that could read thoughts and emotions. Her human approach was completely different from how the aliens had worked. Where they had tried to force everything to follow strict rules, she let her intuition guide her. She welded pieces together that shouldn't have fit, connected systems that were never meant to work together, and held it all in place with spare cables and determination. Months passed in loneliness. Jimin lived on recycled air and artificial food while she worked on her strange creation. The device grew larger and more complex, but she had no blueprint to follow. Instead, she sang while she worked, old Korean folk songs and lullabies her mother had taught her years ago. She discovered that her device seemed to like the music. When she sang, the gravitational anomalies around her became calmer. The strange forces that had terrified alien scientists actually seemed to enjoy her voice. It was as if the station itself was listening to her songs. The breakthrough came on a day when the gravity had been particularly violent. Jimin had been thrown against the ceiling 3 times, and her tools kept floating away from her workbench. She was tired, frustrated, and scared. Without thinking, she began singing a gentle lullaby her mother used to hum when Jimin couldn't sleep. As her voice filled the workshop, something amazing happened. Her device, which had been silent for weeks, suddenly began to hum along with her song. The sound was beautiful, not mechanical, but almost alive. And for the first time since arriving, at Omega 7, the gravity in her workshop became perfectly normal and stable. Jimin looked at her creation in wonder. She had built something that could work with the station's impossible forces instead of fighting them. While alien scientists had tried to control and dominate the gravitational anomalies, she had learned to dance with them. She didn't know it. But her toy would soon change everything the galaxy thought they knew about science, technology, and what it meant to be human. Jimin's strange device had become something no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. While alien scientists tried to fight against the weird gravity around Omega 7, her machine worked together with it like 2 dancers moving to the same music. She had created what she called gravity songs, special sounds that could turn the dangerous forces into helpful tools. Her first real test was simple but amazing. Jimin adjusted some controls on her device and hummed a soft melody. Suddenly, the gravity in her workshop became perfectly normal. She could walk across the floor without worrying about falling toward the ceiling or getting stuck to a wall. After months of being thrown around by crazy gravity, it felt wonderful to move normally again. But as Jimin experimented more, she discovered her device could do incredible things. By changing the music and adjusting different parts, she could make gravity stronger in one spot and weaker in another. She could make time move slower near her workbench, so she had more time to do detailed work while keeping normal time everywhere else. The most amazing discovery came by accident. While testing her device, Jimin accidentally created what looked like a small doorway in the air. When she reached through it, her hand disappeared completely, but she could still feel it moving around in empty space. She had somehow folded space itself, creating a pocket of nothing that she could use like an invisible closet. This gave her an exciting idea. The old hydroponics lab where aliens used to grow food had been empty for years. Jimin moved her device there and began creating a series of connected pocket spaces, each one perfect for different purposes. In one pocket, she made the gravity very light, so plants could grow tall and strong. In another, she sped up time so vegetables could grow from seeds to full size in just a few days instead of weeks. She created a storage pocket where she could keep tons of equipment in a space, no bigger than a small box. She even made a recreation area with Earth-normal gravity, where she could relax and feel like she was back home. Walking between these pocket spaces felt like stepping through invisible doorways into different worlds. But Jimin's biggest breakthrough came when she realized just how powerful her device really was. She wasn't just changing gravity in small ways. She was actually rewriting the basic rules of space and time in whatever area she chose. It was like having the ability to edit reality itself. One day, while playing with her device, Jimin created something that took her breath away. In the palm of her hand, she made a tiny star system. A small ball of light, no bigger than a marble, sat in the center, while even tinier dots orbited around it like planets. The little star actually produced real light and heat through nuclear fusion, just like a real sun but perfectly safe and controlled. She discovered she could create massive amounts of clean energy by having her device work together with the natural, quantum forces that existed everywhere in space. While alien technology fought against these forces and wasted huge amounts of power, her method worked with them and actually gained energy in the process. The best part was that everything she did was completely safe. Alien scientists had always been afraid of the gravitational anomalies because they were violent and unpredictable. But Jimin's approach turned those same forces into gentle, helpful partners. It was like the difference between trying to ride a wild horse and dancing with a willing partner. Standing in her transformed workshop, Jimin looked around in wonder at what she had created. The room itself had become impossible. Walls that curved into spaces that shouldn't exist, corners that led to pocket dimensions, and furniture that floated at exactly the right height for her to use comfortably. The architecture folded and twisted like origami made from space itself. She thought about her father's words from long ago. Humans fix things differently than others, Jimin. We don't just repair them. We make them better. Now she finally understood what he meant. Other species tried to force the universe to obey their rules through mathematics and rigid control, but humans had something different, the ability to listen to what the universe wanted and work together with it. Her device didn't just manipulate physics, it created harmony between technology and nature. Where aliens saw chaos that needed to be controlled, Jimin had found music that wanted to be heard. Her toy had taught her that the universe wasn't a machine to be operated, but a living song that wanted to be sung together. She grew vegetables in impossible gardens, stored infinite amounts of equipment in tiny spaces, and created miniature, solar systems like works of art. Every day brought new discoveries as she learned to sing new songs with the fundamental forces of reality itself. Jimin had started with nothing but junk parts and intuition. Now she had created something that would change how the entire galaxy understood science and technology. But she didn't know that yet. For now, she was just a lonely girl who had learned to make friends with the universe itself, turning an abandoned station into a place of wonders that shouldn't exist. Something impossible was happening at Omega 7. The abandoned research station that had been silent for 30 years suddenly began sending out clear radio signals across the galaxy. These weren't distress calls or simple messages. They were complex transmissions full of mathematical equations, gravity measurements, and most shocking of all, live video showing physics that shouldn't exist. The videos showed a young human girl creating miniature stars in her hands, walking through walls that folded like paper and growing plants in floating gardens where time moved at different speeds. Scientists across the galaxy watched these transmissions with disbelief, certain they had to be fake or some kind of elaborate trick. Within 3 weeks, the largest fleet in galactic history was speeding toward Omega 7. Every major species sent their best scientists and most advanced ships. The Valdari brought their greatest physics experts, the ones who understood mathematics better than any other species. The Harmony sent specialists who could measure the tiniest changes in energy and matter. The Depths Collective dispatched their chaos theory experts, beings who studied randomness and disorder. All of them expected to find the same thing: Jimin's dead body, and perhaps some broken technology that had worked briefly before falling apart. No one could survive alone on Omega 7 for more than a few weeks, and certainly no primitive human could create the impossible things shown in those video transmissions. But when the alien ships approached the station, they found something that made no sense. Their shuttles were guided smoothly into docking bays by perfect artificial gravity, something that should have been impossible in the chaotic gravitational field around Omega 7. Even stranger, the docking bays seemed to be bigger inside than they looked from outside, as if space itself had been stretched. The alien delegation walked through corridors that bent and twisted in ways that hurt their minds to look at, yet somehow felt completely natural to move through. They passed gardens blooming with earth vegetables and alien plants growing together in floating spheres where tiny artificial suns provided perfect light and warmth. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Keth, the lead Valdari scientist. His crystal body was shaking with confusion. "These readings make no sense. The gravitational fields here should tear anything apart, not create this." They found Jimin in what had once been the main laboratory but was now expanded into a huge workshop the size of a cathedral. She sat at a workbench that floated in midair, casually tinkering with some device while small metal objects orbited around her head like tiny planets around a sun. She looked healthy and happy, completely at ease in surroundings that should have killed her months ago. "Welcome to Omega 7, Jimin said in perfect galactic standard, looking up with a bright smile. "I was wondering when someone would come to visit me." The alien scientists stood frozen in shock. They had expected to find a corpse, not a thriving young woman who seemed to be controlling forces they couldn't even understand. Behind her, impossible. Architecture stretched into distances that couldn't fit inside the station they had seen from outside. "How are you alive?" asked Commander Thix of the Depths Collective, her skin flashing colors of amazement and fear. Jimin laughed, a sound full of joy and confidence. I learned to listen to what this place was trying to tell me. Everyone else tried to fight it, but I decided to dance with it instead. To demonstrate, Jimin stood up and made a simple gesture with her hand. Suddenly, gravity in one corner of the room became so strong that loose objects fell toward it like iron to a magnet. With another gesture, she made gravity disappear completely in another area, causing tools and equipment to float gently in the air. The alien scientists watched in amazement as Jimin showed them more impossible things. She made time slow down in one spot while speeding it up in another. She folded space like origami, creating doorways that led to rooms that couldn't possibly fit inside the station. She grew a plant from seed to full size in seconds by controlling the flow of time around it. But the most incredible demonstration came when Jimin cupped her hands together and created a perfect miniature solar system. A tiny star burned safely in her palms while even smaller planets orbited around it. The little star produced real light and heat through nuclear fusion, just like the giant stars that lit up space, but completely controlled and harmless. This breaks 17 fundamental laws of physics, Dr. Keth declared, his voice cracking with strain as his logical mind tried to process what he was seeing. Jimin shook her head gently, still smiling. No, it doesn't break any laws, it just follows different laws that you haven't learned about yet. You all think the universe is like a big machine that you can control by pushing the right buttons and using the right formulas. But it's not a machine at all. She gestured around the transformed station, where impossible spaces folded into each other and tiny suns provided light for floating gardens. The universe is alive, and it wants to work with you if you're willing to listen to its song. You just have to learn how to sing along. The alien delegates looked at each other in confusion and wonder, realizing that everything they thought they knew about science might be wrong. News of Jimin's impossible achievements spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. On every civilized world, scientists gathered in meeting halls and laboratories, watching the video transmissions from Omega-7 over and over again. What they saw challenged everything they thought they knew about physics, technology, and the nature of the universe itself. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting that lasted for days. The same beings who had once voted to exile a troublesome, human girl now found themselves completely confused by what she had accomplished. Their greatest minds worked frantically to understand how a primitive species could create technology that their advanced civilizations couldn't even dream of. When Jimin returned to the council chamber, everything was different. Instead of standing as a condemned criminal, she was invited as an honored guest. The representatives who had once looked down on her with disgust now listened to every word she spoke with desperate attention. I know this is hard for you to understand, Jimin said, her voice calm and confident as it echoed through the vast chamber. Your species are all very intelligent and you've built amazing civilizations, but you all make the same mistake. You treat the universe like a giant puzzle that you can solve by finding the right equations and formulas. The alien delegates leaned forward, hanging on her words. You try to control everything, to force natural forces to obey your rules. But the universe doesn't want to be controlled. It wants to work with you like a partner in a dance. You just have to learn how to listen to its music. The technology Jimin had created became the foundation for a completely new age of galactic civilization. Her quantum harmony drives revolutionized space travel, making it safer and faster than anyone had ever imagined. Ships could now travel between stars in days instead of months, gliding smoothly through space by working with natural forces instead of fighting against them. Her artificial gravity generators allowed aliens to colonize worlds that had been impossible to live on before. Planets with crushing gravity or no gravity at all could now be made comfortable for any species. Her pocket dimension storage technology solved resource problems across dozens of worlds, allowing people to store unlimited amounts of goods in spaces no bigger than a closet. But the real change wasn't just in the technology itself. Jimin's success forced every alien species to completely rethink what they thought they knew about intelligence and capability. All the traits that had made humans seem primitive and dangerous, their emotional thinking, their ability to see patterns where others saw chaos, their tendency to treat non-living things as if they were alive, turned out to be incredible strengths. Universities throughout the galaxy quickly established new departments called human studies. Alien scholars traveled to human colonies, desperate to understand how a species that had barely learned to travel between stars could achieve breakthroughs that civilizations millions of years older had never imagined. "How do you think outside the box?" asked Dr. Venn, a harmony researcher who had spent her entire life studying rigid logical patterns. "What box?" replied a human engineer, genuinely confused by the question. Human colonies that had once been ignored or barely tolerated suddenly found themselves flooded with alien visitors. Scientists, philosophers, and engineers from advanced civilizations came to learn about creativity, intuition, and what humans called gut feelings. They studied human art, music, and poetry, trying to understand how these seemingly useless activities could lead to scientific breakthroughs. When the Galactic Council offered Jimin the position of Chief Quantum Engineer for the entire galaxy, the highest scientific position that existed, she surprised everyone by politely saying no. "Thank you for the honor," she told the assembled delegates, "but I have something more important to do." Instead, Jimin asked for permission to return to Earth and establish the first interstellar engineering academy for humans. She wanted to teach other young humans the art of quantum harmonics, knowing that each student would hear different melodies in the cosmic symphony and create their own impossible inventions. "My device isn't really the breakthrough here," Jimin explained to the council. "The real discovery is understanding that there are as many different ways to understand the universe as there are different kinds of minds to think about it. Humans bring something special to the galaxy, not because we're better than anyone else, but because we're different, and the universe is big enough for all kinds of different ways of thinking." Jimin returned to Earth not as the exiled troublemaker she had once been, but as humanity's first galactic ambassador. In a workshop in Seoul, surrounded by eager young students, she began teaching the art of listening to the universe's hidden songs. Her students came from all over Earth, engineers and artists, scientists and musicians, dreamers and builders. Each one learned to hear different melodies in the cosmic harmony, and each one created devices that seemed impossible, but worked perfectly. The girl who had been thrown away for being too human had discovered that being human was exactly what the galaxy needed. Her exile had become humanity's greatest gift to the stars, proving that sometimes the most important breakthroughs come from the most unexpected places. In her workshop, surrounded by the gentle hum of devices that danced with the fundamental forces of reality, Jimin smiled as she watched her students learn to sing along with the universe itself.